tonight's ceremonial first pitch. And please welcome the President of the United States.
And welcome back to Newsmax Now. That was President Bush throwing out the first pitch during the Game 3 of the 2001 World Series. That was just a little over a month after the 9/11 terror attacks on America. In my opinion, one of the most powerful examples of how baseball and the Commander-in-Chief can unite the nation. There's a new book out that's just been released called The Presidency and the Pastime. It's written by a former White House speechwriter and one of America's leading baseball historians who calls baseball, of course, the most American sport, thanks in part to its close relationship with the presidency. The author's name is Curt Smith, and he joins us now. Curt Smith, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, we opened the segment with that clip of George W. Bush throwing out the first pitch during Game 3 of the 2001 World Series. That tradition, you write, was actually started by William Howard Taft all the way back in 1910. Now, you worked for W's dad in the White House, and you quote him as saying, "Baseball has everything." What did he mean by that?
Well, it was a marvelously succinct and beautiful description of baseball, its grasp, its lure, why we love it. And it was something that he first thought the very first time he picked up a baseball bat. And he was talking to me once about why he loved the game. Baseball has everything. And I asked him how old he was when he first thought that. And he said, I was age 5. And he's about ready to turn 94. And for 89 years, he's loved the game because baseball has everything. And it was a wonderful way to put it. He does love the game. I've known him now for about 30 years. And it's been one of the ties I know that's bound us and bound him to so many tens of millions of Americans among his other virtues. And it really is one of the institutions, along with the presidency itself, those two great American institutions that are ours, that began here, that originated in the United States, and that I talk about in the Presidency and the Pastime in what I refer to as this twinning of the heart, this relationship, kinship between two great American heirlooms.
You know, it was so great to see the Houston Astros win the World Series. You could see that childish joy in the eyes of George H.W. Bush when it happened. Now, officially, baseball was not invented until 1839, but you write that a form of the game was actually being played during the Revolutionary War, perhaps a descendant of the European sports, rounders and cricket. But which president do you think deserves the most credit for really making the game America's pastime?
Well, it's a team effort, to use a metaphor. I think probably in terms of the first pitch, William Howard Taft. It was a big job, and he was a big man. All 300 pounds of him. He truly loved the game. He threw out the first pitch to inaugurate the first game in 1910, and he made it a relic of spring. It was a herald, which is basically saying spring is here, and so is the game. He so loved it that he's the only president to have ever seen on the same day one game from each major league in 1910. A 1962 poll in the Sporting News called him the greatest fan among all American presidents. We might have to have a recount today. But Taft certainly began the ritual. And I don't think that there has ever been a president who more loved the game than Taft, although, boy, there are some other contenders, too.
Conversely, I was a little bummed to find out that Teddy Roosevelt, who was my favorite president, perhaps, didn't really like the game at all. Why not?
Well, you may have to have a recount now. TR was a great president, but he also loved three things in anything he did: gore, violence, and death. And baseball was over 3. Baseball is specific. It is a gentle sport. It was too mollycoddled, to use the TR expression, for him. But here's the kicker. He couldn't say so. He loathed the game. He despised it. But he had to pretend as if he liked it. Why? Because baseball was so popular that he was deathly afraid that if he said his true feelings, he would be booted out of the White House. He would be denied the second term. So in essence, he had to lie to the American public. There are baseball officials that came to the White House in the Oval Office that are going on in TR's presence about what a great fan he is, about how he loves the game. So the expression grin and bear it was truly true that day. He grinned, he bore it, he didn't believe a word.
There's another part of the book that I love where you talk about Nixon in the 1972 World Series as a metaphor for the political climate of the time. You write that the Oakland A's represented the counterculture and the clean-shaven Reds represented the silent majority. And you say there was an acquired cultural coloration there. Was that a unique phenomenon just in 1972, or does that tend to happen in Major League Baseball?
It can and often does, but it was particularly pronounced that year. Nixon, for one thing, personalized the presidency more than any man since Theodore Roosevelt. I remember that time because it was my coming of age as a college student. And you loved Nixon or you hated him. You went to a bar and you said Richard Nixon, and the guy to the left bought you a drink, and the guy on your right poured a drink on your head. That was true then, it's true now. And Nixon was perhaps, along with Taft and the two Bushes, the greatest baseball fan of all time. I can say this, he was the greatest baseball student of all time. Nixon brought an endearing Walter Mitty quality to the presidency. He was a terrible athlete, but he loved the game.
And that's why I really encourage people to check out that chapter of the book where Nixon makes his all-star list, his greatest teams of all time. It's really fascinating to see. And you can kind of, if you're a student of Nixon, you can see that consistency in this process as well. As we wrap up here, Curt, one last thing I want to talk about. You say Donald Trump was a big league prospect, but he turned his back on the game because he didn't think he could make enough money.
Well, he said, you know, he was a fine player at New York Military Institute. No speed, but he was stocky, a pull hitter. He would have been dynamite at Fenway Park. I'm a Red Sox fan. I can just see him pummeling the wall. But here's the kicker. He said, I didn't want to make baseball money. I wanted to make real money. And he did. He wanted to make real money, but he could have been a big league prospect and undoubtedly played first base for either one of those two teams. But here's the point. He has yet to throw out the first ball for fear, I believe, he fears he would be booed at Nationals Park. My advice, Mr. President, we want you to throw out that first ball, get out to Nationals Park, and continue this priceless American relic. Each year, the President of the United States throws out the first ball.
I'd love to see it. Maybe at Yankee Stadium. I don't know. We'll see. Curt Smith, I love the book. It's a great Father's Day gift. It's called The Presidents and the Pastime. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. You bet.
Coming up, hockey history was made last night. We'll show you why the victory was especially moving for one of the players.